Hey, Howell here. What I want to do today is like a video book review on Harry Harrison's novel Make Room, Make Room, published in 1966 and set in 1999. And then moving on to the adaptation of it, which is a film called Soylent Green, 1973, starring Charlton Heston. So to begin with, it's a dystopian sci-fi thriller with some sort of eco disaster of the future theme to it. So it's set really in the style and the genre of Orwell's 1984, where that's written in the late 40s, published and then set in 1984. And Harry Harrison, the author, he had met an Indian guy who had warned him of the dangers of unchecked population and perhaps senseless migration policies where cultures were just mixing like that and colliding with each other, if you like. And then the hoarding of wealth and resources by a minority elite. So the basic synopsis is, you've got this, the basic synopsis is you've got this guy called Billy Chan. There's a riot breaks out, and this guy called Billy Chan, who's sort of half Taiwanese, half American, uses the riot as a cover to loot these Soylent Green burgers. Billy Chan, he's not in the film, as we'll find out later. And he does that, but he eats some of them and he raises enough money, and he does this deliberately so that he has a deposit, I think it's called, for Western Union. And what he wants to do is get inside the houses, because he has to go on these deliveries, delivering messages or whatever. He gets into people's houses and he can rearrange them, the doors and what have you, so he can break in later. So he visits this a fortified apartment where a guy called Mike O'Brien, who's a extremely rich sort of mafioso, white collar criminal, is living there, and with his girlfriend Shirl. And then Shirl is quite pleasant, but Mike O'Brien is extremely unpleasant and a sort of odious character. And then as Billy Chan is leaving, he rearranges things, and then he breaks in later. And before he can steal anything, Mike O'Brien then catches him, and Billy Chan just takes him out with this metal stick or whatever. And it's an accident, he doesn't mean to kill him. And then Billy Chan is on the run. Now this brings in the main character, a guy called Andy, a detective. And then what happens, we then find out that Cheryl, this horrible dystopian world, has forced this attractive woman to become like a parasite. She is forced to sort of feed off men that can't, for favors, that can provide her with support. So she goes from Mike O'Brien to the detective, and then it just, he goes after Billy Chan, and then what happens is, in the end, it's just like a really unhappy ending. The book is very unhappy all the way through it, and it doesn't have a particularly happy ending. I think it's because Harry Harrison, the novelist, is trying to get forward a message, and it would be ruined with a happy ending, of the dangers of overpopulation and this hoarding of wealth from the elite. And the consequence is this martial law, this centralized power, etc., etc. Now, the film is set in 1970, is published in 1973, and obviously set sometime in the future. I don't exactly know the date. And it's directed by Richard Fisher. Soylent Green, it's called. Richard Fisher, I believe you pronounce it. And Charlton Heston plays the main character here, the detective. And then you've got Lee Taylor Young is Cheryl, and she's really well casted. And Edward G. Robinson in his last film, 1973. it plays Sol. And Sol has a much more of an erudite, intellectual sort of personality character in this, and there's a reason for that. And so what happens is that Mike O'Brien in the book is William Simonson in the film. And I don't know why many of the names have changed, but there's no Billy Chan in the film. But what happens is we find out that William Simonson, yeah, instead of just sort of being a racketeer gangster, he's a board member for Soylent Green. And he finds out, knows that it's very corrupt, and he obviously knows what's in Soylent Green, and it affects his conscience, and that affects his behavior. And so they just got to eliminate him. There's nothing, it's very like 1984 in that respect. And so somebody, a hired hitman, breaks in to kill him, and William Simonson is expecting his murder, and there's no way out of it. He succumbs to it, and he is murdered. He is killed. And then as we move on, Sol, played by Edward G. Robinson, comes into possession. That's a detective's flatmate. Comes into possession of the oceanography report of Soylent, the Soylent Green oceanography report, where he finds out that the seas are all polluted and toxic, and that the plankton is all being killed. Therefore, then that's cited as one of the main ingredients of these burgers, of this food, Soylent Green, and therefore it raises the question as to where, what's in these burgers. I'm not going to give any spoilers here. And he reveals that to the detective on his deathbed, and then the detective then investigates it himself, and he then wants to expose it to the world. So there's a kind of slightly happier ending in the film, that there's hope for the future because the truth is coming out. Now, my own view on population, it's just a view of perception, is that I just genuinely think that the planet is overpopulated, especially with humans in their current condition of like the living in the me, the id, with all the greed. Like somebody said to Noam Chomsky, the solution, why don't we just get rid of money? And you go, well, you get rid of money, you haven't got rid of greed. You can get rid of capitalism, but you haven't got rid of the problem, the real problem of capitalism, which is greed and selfishness and meism and things, the human condition. You can't have 7 billion people living and increasing like that. So I've never gone along with this alt-right sort of conspiracy theory that there's some sort of conspiracy to get the population down. If they are conspiring, they're not doing very well. They're not doing particularly very well. I don't have the solution at all. I mean, when you watch these like The Inconvenient Truth with Al Gore, and the problem is overpopulation. Well, it's not just overpopulation, is it? It's not like, it's not just overpopulation. There are other reasons for it. I don't agree with that, but I don't go along with that the world isn't overpopulated, and they think, it's because we're all living in these, crammed into these cities. If we all spread out a bit, reversing the Industrial Revolution. So you would, everybody would be taking over these green spaces. And I know there could be an environmentally ecological way of doing it, but I don't see that. I just think that we are overpopulated. And thank you very much for joining me. That's my review of Make Room, Harry Harrison, published in 1966, and the film 1973, Richard Fisher, I think it's pronounced that way, starring Charlton Heston. And then Lee Taylor-Young plays Cheryl. She's really well casted in that, I think. And then Edward G. Robinson in his last film, playing Sol. And thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.